Good evening. What you are about to hear is one of those curious cases which, though never committed to the official annals of Scotland Yard, remains indelibly impressed upon my own memory. It is a narrative of reason confronting superstition, of shadow yielding to method, and of a mind so incisive that even the most ancient terrors of mankind were rendered explicable. I give it here exactly as I witnessed it, in the hope that the listener may share something of my astonishment, and perhaps my quiet amusement, at the outcome. It was upon a fog-softened evening in late October that this singular affair first presented itself to us. The gas lamps along Baker Street burned with a sullen glow, their light diffused into trembling halos by the yellow mist which crept, cat-like, along the pavement. Within our sitting room at number 221B, however, all was warmth, order, and that peculiar sense of intellectual expectancy which so often preceded my friend's most remarkable exertions. Sherlock Holmes lay stretched upon the sofa, his long, spare figure outlined against the Persian rug that hung behind him. His eyes were half closed, his fingers steepled, and his breathing so slow and regular that a stranger might well have taken him for asleep. I, having just returned from my afternoon rounds, had settled into the armchair by the fire with a medical journal, though I confess that my attention wandered more frequently to Holmes than to the pages before me. "You are wondering, Watson," he remarked suddenly, without opening his eyes, "whether the article you pretend to read is worth the paper upon which it is printed." I smiled. "I was wondering rather whether you intended to remain in that cataleptic state for the remainder of the evening." Holmes opened one eye. "Hardly. I am merely allowing my mind to arrange certain impressions which, taken singly, are trivial, but which, when properly aligned, promise a diversion of some interest." "May I ask the nature of these impressions?" "You may ask," he replied, sitting up and reaching for his pipe, "but I may not yet answer. Suffice it to say that they concern Kingston upon Thames, a riverside suburb not generally associated with excitement, and a set of circumstances which have caused several otherwise sensible people to utter the word vampire without irony." I raised my eyebrows. "A vampire, my dear Holmes, is precisely what the local papers have been hinting at," he interrupted, "and what certain residents are already convinced of. Fear, Watson, is the most contagious of diseases." Before I could reply, there came a sharp knock at the door below, followed by Mrs. Hudson's familiar step upon the stairs. "A gentleman to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, ushering in our visitor. "He seems distressed." The man who entered was of middle height, perhaps 40 years of age, with a face prematurely lined by anxiety. His clothes were of good quality but worn carelessly, as though their owner had long ceased to take pride in his appearance. He clutched his hat in both hands, twisting it nervously as he stood before us. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" he asked. "At your service," said Holmes, indicating a chair. "Pray sit down. You have come, I imagine, regarding some matter in Kingston." The man started. "How could you know that?" Holmes smiled faintly. "The reddish clay upon your boots is peculiar to the river paths near Kingston. The faint smell of damp paper suggests recent handling of local newspapers, and your expression tells me that you have not come merely out of curiosity." Our client sank into the chair. "My name is Edward Langley. Was the steward of the Hawthorne estate, just outside Kingston. My employer, Sir Alistair Hawthorne, is dead." "I am sorry to hear it," I said. Holmes inclined his head. "And you fear that his death was not natural?" Langley's voice dropped to a whisper. "They say he was drained of blood." There was a pause during which Holmes tamped his pipe with deliberate care. "Tell us everything, Mr. Langley," he said quietly, "from the beginning and without embellishment." Sir Alistair Hawthorne, it seemed, had been a man of eccentric habits. A widower of considerable means, he lived alone in a large old-fashioned house overlooking the Thames, attended only by a small staff. He kept irregular hours, often walking alone at night along the riverbank, and had recently developed an interest in certain obscure Eastern European manuscripts dealing with folklore and vampirism. "A harmless fancy," Langley insisted, "or so we thought." But then the deaths began. There had been, In the preceding fortnight, 3 deaths in the vicinity. A homeless man found beneath the arches of Kingston Bridge, a young woman discovered in a riverside alley, and finally Sir Alistair himself, found in his bedchamber at dawn. In each case, there were puncture marks upon the neck and a notable absence of blood at the scene. "The coroner is baffled," Langley said. "The police speak of an animal attack, but no beast leaves such wounds. And the people," he shook his head, "they will not walk the streets after sunset. Children are kept indoors. Some say they have seen a tall, dark figure moving along the river at night." Holmes removed his pipe. "And you, Mr. Langley, what do you say?" "I say," the man replied hoarsely, "that something is killing people, and that if it is not stopped, there will be more." Holmes rose. "Very good. Watson, we shall go to Kingston." We arrived the following afternoon, the fog having lifted to reveal a pale autumn sun. Kingston presented a peaceful aspect. The river flowed broad and untroubled, the shops bustled with ordinary commerce, and yet beneath it all there was a palpable tension, like a held breath. Holmes spent the first hours walking, observing the riverbank, examining the sites of the deaths, speaking casually with boatmen, shopkeepers, and constables. He asked questions that seemed, to my mind, trivial to the point of irrelevance. The hours at which lamps were lit, the habits of stray dogs, the recent arrival of any foreigners in the district. That evening, we were admitted to Hawthorne House. It was a gloomy structure, with high ceilings and heavy draperies that shut out the dying light. Sir Alistair's bedchamber had been left undisturbed since the death. Holmes examined the body with professional detachment. "Note the wounds, Watson," he said. "2 small punctures, cleanly made. No tearing, no sign of struggle." "Which would seem to support—" "Nothing at all," he said sharply. "One must not reason backward from a conclusion already formed." He moved about the room, his eyes darting from object to object. Suddenly he stopped by the window. "Observe," he said, pointing. "The sill." There was a faint smear of reddish-brown. "Blood?" I asked. "No, clay. The same as upon Mr. Langley's boots. And see here." He produced a lens and examined the floor. "Footprints, barely visible, but unmistakable. A man's shoe, size 8 or 9, with a distinctive wear upon the heel." "But the window," I began. "Was open from the inside," Holmes finished. "Our visitor did not enter through it. He left by it." That night, Holmes insisted upon walking alone along the river after midnight. I protested, but he merely smiled. "Should I encounter a vampire," he said, "I shall endeavor to reason with it." He returned at dawn, his eyes bright. "I have seen our nocturnal wanderer," he announced, "and he is no more supernatural than you or I." The revelation came the following evening, in the great hall of Hawthorne House, with Langley, several members of the household, and a visibly skeptical police inspector present. Holmes stood before them, his manner calm, almost conversational. "The idea of a vampire," he began, "is an old one and a powerful one. It explains much with little effort. Unfortunately, it explains nothing correctly." He turned to Langley. "Sir Alistair was being slowly poisoned." A murmur ran through the room. "A substance derived from foxglove," Holmes continued, "administered in small doses. It weakens the heart, induces fainting, and in sufficient quantity causes death. The puncture wounds were inflicted after death to mislead the authorities. The blood was removed to enhance the illusion." "And the other deaths?" demanded the inspector. "Unfortunate necessities," Holmes replied. "Both victims had discovered the truth, or were about to. Our murderer required the cover of superstition." He paused, then pointed. "The murderer is Mr. Edward Langley." Langley staggered back, his face ashen. "You were Sir Alistair's steward," Holmes said. "You managed his accounts. You knew that he had recently altered his will, cutting you out in favor of a charitable trust. You also knew of his interest in vampiric lore, and you exploited it. The clay on your boots, the footprints, the timing of your visits, all point to you." Langley collapsed into a chair. "I never meant—" he began, then broke off. Holmes turned away, the matter already finished in his mind. As we returned to London the next day, the fog had lifted entirely, and the river sparkled in the morning light. "Another monster laid to rest," I remarked. Holmes smiled thinly. "Monsters, Watson, are merely men who have found a convenient mask." And with that, he relapsed into silence, leaving me to reflect, as I so often did, upon the curious intersection of reason and fear, and upon the singular privilege of observing the workings of the most remarkable mind of our age.